Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. For those who don't know me, my name is Stephen Wall, and I am the lucky guy who chairs the council here at UCL, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this first of the lunchtime lectures of this academic year and the first lecture of our new Provost. There is a live feed and all the usual podcasts and things that you would expect. In terms of questions, because of the way the auditorium is constructed, we can't do a kind of roving mic thing. So what we have done is take some questions in advance. You've been given the means, and I hope some will continue to tweet questions during the course of Michael Arthur's lecture, and then at the end, or during, we will gather those up, and in the question and answer period, we'll try and get through as many of your questions as we can. Those that we don't get through will be answered in due course online. So if you have questions you want to tweet, please do so at UCL LHL and use the hashtag AskProvost. During World War II, the professor of economics at Cambridge, Professor Brian Redaway, was asked by the government to do a report on how to stop fuel destined for essential services being siphoned off to the black market. And he produced the shortest report for government ever written, which consisted of 3 words: colour it pink, which they did and indeed still do. I'm going to take 5 times as long to say, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new President and Provost, Professor Michael Arthur.
Sir Stephen, thank you for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first lunch hour lecture of the new academic session. Let me start by saying it's a very great honour to be the new President and Provost of UCL. I'm delighted to be here at last. It's a very long time between the appointments process and actually turning up, but I've been here now for a month and I'm having a great time. It's absolutely fabulous, this academic institution. So the focus of my lecture today will be my, or perhaps I should say our, vision for UCL. But before I get into the substance of that, I do want to acknowledge the contribution of my predecessor, Sir Malcolm Grant, a very distinguished leader in higher education and a great leader of this university, with many great achievements, most of which culminate in him being very much loved by staff and students alike. Quite an achievement. So let me start by talking about 2 key platforms that you and Malcolm have created, and I think they form a very sound base from which to build a vision. And the first of those platforms is the values of UCL. And obviously any vision that we come up with must integrate with and be grounded in those values. They're in the white paper, and I'm going to take this opportunity to remind you what they say. They're very brief and succinct. They include a commitment to excellence and achievement on merit, fairness and equity, diversity, collegiality and community building, inclusiveness, openness, ethically acceptable standards of conduct, fostering innovation and creativity, developing leadership, and finally, environmental sustainability. That's a wonderful list. So the first part of my vision would be to live to, personally, and to uphold those values and to promote them very widely across UCL. I will immediately say that I think there are 2 areas where more attention or perhaps a new or different approach are required. And I think that includes diversity, particularly with respect to gender and to black and minority ethnic issues, and also fair access for students from all backgrounds to UCL. My personal interest would be in students coming to us from low-income families and low participation neighbourhoods. I personally think that the state school, private school divide metric is not particularly helpful. But I think we would be incredibly proud if we could bring students from all backgrounds, irrespective of their ability to pay, into this institution. And I think we need to do more work to find more talented students from around London, of course, but also more widely around the country. The second key platform that I'm inheriting is a platform of performance and an outstanding reputation for this institution. The league tables, the much beloved league tables, are of course a mixed bag, including today's news that we've dropped 4 points in the Times Higher World League Table to 21st, and yet remarkably we were 4th in the QS World League Table. I think we could generally regard ourselves as one of the top 20 institutions in the world, or certainly a leading world-class institution. More evidence for that is provided by the research assessment exercise in 2008, when UCL submitted some 1,800 staff, and in 43 out of 49 units of assessment, more than 50% of the work that we submitted was graded at the highest level, 4-star, or 1 notch down, but still internationally excellent, 3-star. We are, of course, just about to press the button on submitting the modern version, REF 2014, the Research Evaluation Framework documents. And I know all of you have been working incredibly hard to make that series of documents as professional as possible. David Price tells me that we'll be submitting a very much larger number. It's grown by over 300, so well over 2,100 staff will be submitted from this institution. And it's looking as though the grade point average, the score for those submitted research outputs, will exceed 3 out of a possible maximum of 4. That's incredible. Research income has also witnessed incredible growth. If I've got my facts right, in 2003-04, the research spend, the amount of money flowing through the books of UCL in 1 year in 2003-04 was £160 million, already a huge sum of money. By 6-07, it has risen to 200 million, 11-12 to 300 million, and last year another 10% increase, some £334 million for research won in open competition from all sorts of sources, of course, research councils, charities, industry, Europe, etc. The final element of the platform, which I think is deeply impressive, is one that you've all been involved in creating, and that is in your ability to work across disciplinary boundaries and to create interdisciplinary research at all levels, but exemplified by the big grand challenges. That was a very clever and galvanizing idea, and it has gained you a phenomenal reputation. So as I see it, we are a major force and a significant player on a global scale. So the second part of my vision is fairly simple. We must maintain and grow that performance, but we must continue to foster the permissive, autonomous culture that has allowed that level of activity to develop. So I will, of course, continue to support the interdisciplinary approaches, the Grand Challenge approach, and I would like to publicly congratulate David Price and the entire research team and all of you who've been involved in creating that amazing level of achievement. Alongside that research excellence, we must foster and grow our entrepreneurship and our innovation, and we have to do that through identifying, protecting, and exploiting our intellectual property. Steve Caddick has a number of new ideas in that regard that he'll be bringing forward shortly, and I'm highly supportive of greater attention to this area. Why should that be? Well, it's very, very clear from any interaction whatsoever with government that if we're going to maintain levels of research funding across the research councils and through HEFCE, that government likes the argument that our research is linked to innovation and can help economic growth. I was one of the few people who criticised a flat cash settlement. Of course, we were all supposed to be very grateful. Flat cash was a good outcome in very difficult circumstances, but it wasn't an internationally competitive outcome. And I'm delighted to report that that sort of language is now commonplace around the research councils and is well understood, in fact, also being articulated by officials from BIS. So I think that in order to persuade the government to reinvest in research and come up to internationally competitive levels, we need to provide them with the evidence that our research does link to innovation and to economic growth. Those of you from the arts and humanities and social sciences might be a little bit worried about that rather mechanistic approach. And let me just add, of course I understand the importance of creating knowledge for the sake of knowledge. But we also need to explain the value of that to society and build relationships with government that allow them to continue funding in that area too. These two platforms, the values and our academic excellence and performance, allow us the privilege and the pleasure of thinking about a vision for UCL over a much longer timescale than would be typical in an academic environment. So instead of thinking of just 5 to 10 years, I think we should be thinking of a 20 to 30-year time frame and the opportunity to make a real difference on a global scale. We certainly have the opportunity over that time frame to create a comprehensive university that remains of global importance for decades and possibly centuries to come. For most of the rest of the talk, I'll just guide you through what I'm going to say. I'm going to touch on 5 areas where I think we need to focus and improve either our profile, our performance, or both. Some of these are already going quite well, but some need significant discussion, refinement, and then perhaps effective implementation. And these are student education and our student experience, our international activities and strategy, the importance of partnerships and partnership working, our place and our role in London as a city, and the lifelong community of UCL. So let's turn to student education and student experience. I think we need to not only be good at teaching our students, I think we need to become really good at inspiring them. We need to lift them into places that they didn't know that they could go. And I think a mechanism to do that in this university is to build a really close relationship between the research that we do and the education that our students receive. We should move to involving our students in the research process in great detail much earlier in their courses than we currently do. And I guess one would say that we should move from a research-led type of pedagogy into much more of a research-based pedagogy. If we do that, we can take our students right to the edge of knowledge. We can get them to understand what knowledge is, how it's created, and how it changes with time. And we can teach them how to deal with that uncertainty. We can use it to develop their creativity, their critical independent thinking skills, their problem-solving skills, we can build their confidence, we can build their ability to communicate and to work in a team. And we can create those highly desirable, highly employable graduates, many of whom will become leaders of the future. Because we are UCL, we can, if we want to, become the very best at this in the world. We can use the outstanding excellence of our research base, and I think we should embed this concept in the very DNA of this institution. There are other aspects of the student experience that need attention. The recent National Student Survey results were poor. There is a great deal to do. I believe this is very important in a highly competitive environment that we get this right. I hear you say, but recruitment into this university is fine. What's the problem? Well, recruitment is, you are quite right, currently buoyant. But we must ensure that it stays that way. And it's my view that if we don't tackle those student experience issues, at some point it will come back to bite us. We have to have a really high quality student experience in both their education and other aspects of their activity here that matches our performance in research, and we have to do it without the research performance falling away. The other things I like about education here are some of the things that you'll be well aware of from the white paper, and the inclusion of the concept of global citizenship into every course, into every program, is something I would be highly supportive of. I would like to take a look at that in detail. Perhaps there's some other things that we could add and think about things that might be attractive to students, things that would give us a competitive margin. For example, do we want our students all of our students to be literate in sustainability? I would certainly be supportive of anything that inspires our students further. I'll turn now to international. London's global university. By any definition, we deserve that title. We are already a major international university with global reach and both staff and students from all over the world. But I think a university's international strategy is a complex issue. If you look around the sector, you will see many different approaches. And that extreme variation, I think, is in itself diagnostic. In my opinion, nobody is yet really excelling in terms of their international strategy, from which you can probably gather that I personally am not a fan of the overseas undergraduate campus approach. I do acknowledge that the UCL niched model of research-intensive overseas campuses associated with postgraduate education, such as UCL Qatar, UCL Australia, and our support of Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan, has, to a degree, been successful. But to my mind, I think we need to think deeper than that, and I think our international strategy needs a unifying theme, or a unifying theme or two, and something that is a bit more distinctive and something that is perhaps consistent with our history and our values. So we are currently discussing a different approach, one in which UCL becomes more of a helpful partner, where we give rather than take from our overseas interests. So we should think about partner activity and working with the global south, expanding, for example, the concepts and the work of the Developmental Planning Unit or the Global Health Grand Challenge. In other words, a more coordinated, problem-solving partnership approach to our international activities. That immediately raises the issue of whether we can do that alone. So the second element of the theme would be to think about doing that more in a network. And this idea didn't come from me, it actually came from Anthony Finkelstein, the idea that we don't necessarily always need to work just with the very best universities out there, that we should think about those universities who would aspire to work with us, those that are hungry, those that are perhaps rising fast in their own countries, those that, like us, want to make a difference. And in that model, UCL would be a central figure, a key player in an otherwise exciting and different type of partnership, a committed partnership, a partnership that wants to make a difference. That brings me to partnership more generally. I've spent my life competing for funding and being highly competitive at a personal level and for any organisation that I've worked for. And I think having been through all of that and then having watched what's happened in recent times, it's actually very interesting. When you look at London from outside, you tend to think that UCL and King's and Imperial and others in other fields are highly competitive with each other, possibly at each other's throats from time to time. But in fact, when you come down here, you do find a lot more partnership working than is apparent from the outside. So I quite like that. I quite like the idea that we could be very generous in our partnership approach. We could be generous in our style. We could be generous in our flexibility, our willingness to listen to partners and to engage new partners. And we could even think about being, intermittently at least, generous financially. There are some good examples. The Crick Institute and the London Centre for Nanotechnology are two such examples, and I think we need to do a lot more of that partnership approach. Many different partners, of course. Industry would be key, and I'm going to come to the NHS shortly. I'd now like to turn to a few thoughts about our role in London as a city. So London has the opportunity to be the number one city, the number one destination for higher education in the world. And within that, and alongside our key partners, such as the NHS in UCL partners, we also have the opportunity to be the number one city in the world for excellence in biomedicine and health. The Crick, of course, is another key ingredient. But there's also a strong desire being expressed by the Mayor to create a significant and perhaps different post-Olympic legacy. And we need to decide whether or not we want to put UCL at the centre of that concept, especially if over the longer time frame it allows us to develop new activities and new partnerships in research, entrepreneurship, innovation and education that we simply would not have the room to house here in Bloomsbury. I also want to project to you the notion of UCL as a lifelong community. Our alumni and our other committed supporters are a major force for good for UCL. And we should work closely with them to create a university that they would be very proud of. Alumni contribute in many different ways. They do control the reputation of UCL, particularly overseas, and we can harness that and help them develop the reputation of UCL if we support them appropriately. They also, the alumni, inspire current students with their life stories. It's a very powerful force for students to be able to see what's happened from graduates from their own courses some 20, 30, 40 years down the track. Many of our alumni will also be supporting students, creating internships, and supporting recent and fresh graduates. We need to be mindful of that and to support that activity as much as we can. And of course also some alumni, many alumni, support us very much more directly with philanthropic donations. So fundraising in this university is critically important. We have an endowment that is way too small for a university of this reputation and this importance in the country. And I certainly feel the need to do everything that I can to grow that as urgently as possible. I'm going to come now to my final set of comments. And this is more about all of you out there in the audience, and all of you who may be listening. A university is a community, and it's a community of all of its staff, all of its students, and all of its stakeholders. We are unique organisations. We are complicated, but we are highly creative entities. UCL enjoys its history and its culture, that slightly rebellious institution that you all love to be, and proud of your ability to question perceived wisdom. That must continue. I will respect that history, and I will work with that grain. Now, there's little point me standing up here with those elements of a vision if not much else happens later down the track. So what we need to do is move from those ideas of what we might see UCL looking like over that 15 to 30 year time frame, and we need to build that into a more comprehensive strategy that thinks about our staff, that thinks about our estate, that thinks about our finances, but of course right at the centre of it has to be all of the academic elements that you would expect to see in a modern strategy for a university. The white paper is excellent. It is a superb document, but it is 51 pages long, and I'm tempted to ask you now to raise your hand if you've read it. The Provost report's about 20%, maybe 30. 20% would make my point a little better, so we'll stick with the 20. And therein lies the difficulty. If we're going to achieve at the level that I believe that we can achieve at, we have to have a strategy that everyone knows about, that everyone has read, that people have contributed to, something that you believe in, and something that we can then turn into a plan that we can effectively implement. So this process has already started. We're beginning to think about how to put that together, and I can promise you that in that process your input will be very important to me. So when we're ready and when we think we've got something that looks like a draft perhaps, something that I can promise you will be dramatically shorter than 51 pages, but we'll still have all of the key and important elements there, that we will open that up to consultation. We'll do that through some open meetings, perhaps a bit like this one today. We'll also think about using some webcasts and that sort of approach. We're thinking about a Newsnight type event where people can send their questions in and quiz me about it. And we'll also, of course, have an open website for your comments. I can't promise you that everything that you come up with will be in the strategy, but I know from experience that you will have some ideas that we haven't thought of. And that's the point. I think really finding the very best out of the combined intellectual might of this institution is something that I'd be very keen to achieve. So if we can do that, if we can pull that off, if we can pull together something that you all believe in, then I believe that our future will be assured. So thank you very much for your attention.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a number of questions which I've got on cards here, and I promise you that Michael Arthur hasn't seen them at all in advance, and basically some of them came in before we sat down, and others have come in during the course of the last half hour or so. And some of them cover the same theme, but I'll try and reflect accurately what we've got here. The first one is from Carl Gombrich, an academic colleague. And his question, Michael, is if you could only do one thing to improve undergraduate education at UCL, what would it be? Well, you've outlined a number of things, but...
The number one thing would be the relationship between research and education, because I don't know about you, but I became an academic because I believed that those two things were really closely linked. And I thought that was an incredibly enjoyable way to spend one's life in that interface. I certainly benefited enormously in my undergraduate career from getting really excited and involved in the research activity of a medical school. They've been pulled a long way apart by external activities. So the research assessment exercise, now the research evaluation framework has pulled off in one direction, and the QAA, and then more recently things like the National Student Survey have pulled us in the other direction. And if we choose to leave them out there, then they will be literally tearing us apart. Bit graphic, but you know what I mean. It's our choice to bring them back together and to get other people to see the value of that in terms of them wanting to come here to this institution, and also getting the QAA to understand it, and also HEFKI through the research evaluation framework as it now is. So it's our choice, and my experience of this is that it is actually quite exciting because you're rejoining things that, if they're left alone, consume their own amount of time. If you rejoin them, you can actually work a bit smarter rather than just working much harder. So that, for me, would be the number one thing to do.
Question from Zion Butt, who's a UCL sabbatical officer and a colleague of ours on the council this year. And Zion's question is, I would love to ask the Provost what he thinks UCL lacks as a leading academic and research institution apart from space.
For those of you who already read Provost's View this week, I've had one student write to me, sad to hear that I'm about to die. So obviously something got slightly lost in translation. But I was trying to grab your attention at the beginning of something that can otherwise be a bit dry, space. What does UCL lack? Well, I've just been talking to a group of heads of departments, and we were actually being very frank and honest with each other about this. And the thing that we lack most is as high a reputation for our education and our student experience as we have for our research. So that would be something that I would feel very uncomfortable leaving alone. In fact, Stephen can attest to this. When I applied for the job, I said in my 4-page letter, if you want someone just to drive this research machine, don't appoint me. If you want somebody who's interested in bringing the education up to the same standard of the research, of course keeping the research excellence where it is, then you should take a serious look at my application. And why do I say that? I absolutely 100% believe that it's in the best long-term interests of this university to get that relationship right. In the same heads of departments meeting, somebody who worked in America in one of the Big Ten, the University of Michigan, essentially said at Michigan, this is really simple. It's the mission. It is the mission of the University of Michigan to give its students the best experience. They're at the center of everything, and research is slightly out on the edges. They are, of course, also a brilliant research university. I think number one in the Big Ten for federal research dollars. So the bottom line is, if you set about it, if you set out with this in mind, you can definitely achieve it. If you're happy to let one drift, then it will drift, and you will take the consequences.
There's a question from Steve Scott Robson, which is, how does UCL achieve a comfortable and healthy balance between UK and foreign students?
And if I can just supplement that, I mean, when I came on the council 8 years ago, we were kind of 70 home EU, 30 overseas. I think it's now closer to 60-40. And one of the questions which has been debated in the council, obviously, and elsewhere, is are we able to achieve the quality that we want to achieve in terms of what we offer all our students, home, EU, and overseas, across the board, not just in terms of teaching, but in terms of accommodation, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's also relevant to this, to Steve's question.
There's not a simple answer, I don't think. It's, what's the right percentage of international students? It's a bit like trying to answer the question, what's the right percentage of the British population, 18 to 24-year-olds, to go to university? I mean, nobody actually knows the answer to that question. There are theories, there are numbers bandied around, there are political numbers, but there isn't a right answer. And I don't think there's necessarily a right answer about international students. And there's certainly a view, and I've heard it expressed, that we're a big international university and we should just get the best students to come here and it shouldn't really matter where they come from. And I can kind of see that argument, but it's a bit one end of the extreme. There's an issue, isn't there? And I've seen it surface. For those universities, and there are some in London that have got more international students than us, when things go wrong, the politicians and the press do turn on those organisations and basically accuse them of not really looking after the needs of British students. And that, to me, would not be a comfortable place to be. I think we clearly have a major role in educating British students, EU students alongside them, as a major part of our activity. So whether that's 70-30, 60-40, 55-45, I'm not sure. At the moment, 60-40 feels great. I have to say, when I walk around this campus, I'm kind of used to hearing 3 languages in a 5-minute walk in Leeds. I hear about 6 languages in a 1-minute walk at UCL. It might be something to do with the density of students outside my office, by the way. It creates a buzz. It's highly creative for a university to have all of that diversity, all of those different cultural approaches to solving a problem. It's absolutely fantastic. So I don't really have a kind of a right answer. But I do think, by the way, when we get up to 40% international, we have definitely got the problem, and we need to manage this, of classes full of one nationality of student when they thought they were coming to get a UK-based education experience. So we've got to manage that set of issues, definitely, as best as we can, and create an environment that helps those international students really integrate into university like this. I'm not worried personally about the standard of the students that come here. It's uniformly high across both the British, EU and international students, and it seems to me to be very well managed by admissions tutors, that we are only accepting really top quality students in all 3 categories. So I'm not sure if I've answered all the question, but those are my initial thoughts.
There are a number of other questions related to student experience, and we might come back to them if we have time. But here's one which is from a student, Matthew Deeves. What's Michael Arthur's view on UCL collaborating with and providing prestige to dictatorships in Qatar and Kazakhstan?
Yes, well, thank you. Nice
you can tell he hadn't seen it in advance, can't you?
I think there are two elements to this argument. You can construct an argument that if we're there and we take our values and our principles and our education, that we may help the situation. That over time we may actually help those countries improve their human rights records, for example, and the style of their political system, their democracy, etc. So that's an argument. But I can also quite clearly see the other argument, that the human rights is so bad that we would be deeply worried about associating ourselves with such regimes. And I think those ultimately have to be value judgments on a case-by-case basis. And this isn't an easy area. And don't for 1 minute think that our own country is completely clean on this. And of course, you don't have to step too far to find other countries where there have been some things going on that you might worry about. Guantanamo Bay comes to mind. So I think before we start, making decisions about this is bad, this is good, I think we need to think about the totality. And China would be another example. It's pretty simple. I don't think we can afford to do anything else other than have a working relationship with a country as important as China.
Question from Keir Gallagher, another sabbatical officer, another colleague of ours on the council this year. Will Michael Arthur commit to divesting from fossil fuels and having a fossil-free UCL?
I love these students and the quality of their questions. That's a hard one. I presume Keir is mainly interested in our investment strategy, what we do with our own money and where we put it. And I think I'm right in saying that there is an ethical investment committee that tries to look at this set of issues and put the money into companies that we would not mind being associated with. I guess there's also part of me that thinks, and I literally don't know what degree of investment we would or would not have in fossil fuels. So there might well be a sort of a rather practical element to the answer that relates to that percentage. If it's a very small percentage and it wouldn't cost us much to change, then maybe. If it's a huge percentage and it would have a dramatic impact on our income, then we would have to think about how to cope with that set of issues before making a change. And in terms of our own, if the question was more about our own energy use, then I don't yet know, because I've not really kind of come to grips with it, where we're getting our energy from and what we're doing. I mean, in general, we should move as green as possible, for sure.
Question here from Danny via Twitter. Can you promise that the UCL Health Centre and GP practice will not move from its present location or close down?
I think it's...
I'm just going through the easy ones.
Well, the UCL Centre does not belong to UCL. That's the first point. It's an independent medical practice with GPs in it. There may be some in the audience, for all I know, who function for the NHS to provide healthcare for UCL, but also for others, for UCL students, but also for others. There are, I'm told, about 3,000 individuals registered who are residents of WC1, some of whom are students from other universities, and some of whom are our staff, and some of whom are members of the public. So it's not something that we control. We don't have a contract. Well, we do have a contract with them, but that's for some other services. So we don't have a contract to provide the healthcare for students. We have big space issues, as you know, and we're trying to solve those. So there is a possibility of a move, and I think it's now reasonably common knowledge that that would be a move to a University of London union building across the road, which has a lot more space. Our health centre, or our current location for the health centre, was designed for about 10,000 students, and it's currently dealing with 27,000 plus all those other people. So there is a real need for improvements to premises. What I can say in answer to the question is that there'll be one or the other. There'll either be a better health centre across the road, which UCL students will be able to go to alongside others, as is currently the case, or if that all falls through, then it will be the current student health centre, in its current location. And we won't leave UCL students without access to healthcare in close proximity to the university. That much I can promise. In fact, there's been quite a lot of misinformation about this, and there has never been a plan to close the Student Health Centre. There's been a plan to move it and improve it, or to leave it where it is.
Question from a staff member, Andrew Dehaney. Will Professor Arthur show a genuine commitment to the London living wage? And why does an organisation the size of UCL need to outsource?
Well, I believe that we are currently paying the London living wage, and that now, I'm informed, includes all of our external arrangements and all staff groups in those agencies that we work with. And I think that there was a legacy issue of a few not being included, but I think we're now beyond that, and everybody is included. So we are committed to doing that. That commitment, by the way, probably costs us around about £2 million a year. But the decision was made that it was worth it. We're an ethical organisation. We want a workforce that feel valued, even when they're working for us from external contractors, and that is something that I am happy to support. I'll go a little bit further. I'm not sure we want to sign on the dotted line to always doing that in perpetuity, because we may be facing situations where we need some flexibility. But I think we will make a commitment now, and make a commitment now that we would only ever move away from that in very, very extreme circumstances. But signing on the dotted line, I don't know if you know how the living wage works, but essentially it's set by a group of academics in Warwick. And I'm not completely comfortable with a group of academics in Warwick setting the finances of UCL. I hope you can understand the logic of that. Why do we need to outsource? Well, a reasonable question. And in fact, interestingly, I did not, I think I'm right in saying I did not outsource a single thing. I think we may have outsourced a little bit of printing just as I arrived at Leeds, but we chose to keep an in-house force for the university. But that's because we were trying to really create something rather unique in Leeds. And we kind of went with that philosophy. A number of things have been outsourced here. That, of course, inevitably gives us more flexibility. It gives us less risk. So I don't think I would be overly keen to rush into re-insourcing everything. But I can tell you that I would look, really carefully and try not to outsource further activities unless I was convinced that it was, in the best interests of UCL in the long run, so to do. So that's, I'm also kind of slightly with the questioner, but we are where we are, and I think to change what's happened already would be quite tricky.
Here's a question from Olivier van Donselaar, who is a second-year student who, he says, loves MOOCs. And the question, therefore, is, considering more and more universities are starting to offer MOOCs, why is UCL not participating in this new and exciting field? And how do you feel about this?
I think the short answer is because we think we can do it better. It's not that we're not participating. I think it's that we're biding our time and thinking about how best to do it, and if you like, not jumping on a bandwagon. I did, when I was at Leeds, go with the British development with FutureLearn. There were some teething difficulties. The contract, for example, with the platform really worked. That's still ongoing. The team at FutureLearn are doing a good job, but there are other good platforms. And I think there's a huge question for us about what we want, what are MOOCs for, and where do they fit into a grander e-learning strategy. So I think there's no final decision that we're never going to do MOOCs. Quite the opposite. I think we're sort of thinking about how best to do them, whether we do them ourselves. If we don't do them ourselves, which platform do we go with, and how do we use them for what we want to achieve as a university? In fact, there's probably something that I didn't quite read off my speech properly. It is clearly a way to project your university internationally, and I think it needs to be wound into the international strategy.
Question from an alumna, Natasha, which ties in a bit, Michael, with what you were saying about encouraging means by which low-income families could aspire to UCL. The question is, with the rise of tuition fees for domestic students, does UCL have any plans to increase the bursaries available to ensure diversity in student membership?
Honest answer is I haven't yet had time to look at the bursary structure nor interrogate it. We need to do more to bring students here. The experts will say that the bursaries are not important in getting students to make decisions to come. I'm not sure I agree with that. And they are certainly very important in allowing students who come from low-income families to have a good experience when they are here. So they are really quite critical in those students being able to afford their time as a student. So if we've got headspace, then it's an obvious area. It's an obvious area for philanthropy. I had 2 major, greater than 7-figure donations from the alumni and the Great and the Good of Yorkshire towards this area, because it's quite attractive to those who themselves have benefited from higher education and who have done well in life to give something back. So that was incredibly helpful. But what the experts will tell you is that what they really want us to do is a lot more outreach activity and to raise aspirations in students from low-income families, and to make that outreach activity more than just superficial. So it needs to be in-depth, it needs to be over the entire year, and it needs to be tailored to the age group that's relevant. And we probably need to go back right the way through secondary school. We've got the UCL Academy, and the UCL Academy, I'm told, this year is 50% of the children are in receipt of free school meals. So that's a significant achievement. But of course, it's in one part of London and one school. And I think we need to be in many more parts of London and many more schools. I haven't yet been able to sit down with the widening participation team. This is a bold thought, and we did do this in Leeds, but we deliberately put together programs that brought students to the university, gave them 10-credit module activities, and if they did well in those modules, we would drop our A-level grade by a grade or 2. Those students, I can tell you, we've done that for 7 consecutive years. The number of firsts and 2-1s that they get is identical to the regular intake. So it can be made to work. Those students do, of course, need extra support. The vast majority of them, by the way, get, because they feel looked after, because they feel that they've got a future ahead of them, they usually do much better in their A-levels than you would think. So you've got a 3 A's course, you drop it to an A and 2 B's, and those students get 3 A's or A-star 2 A's. So it's not that the risk to the league table position and the A-level score is actually much, much lower than you imagine it might be. And I haven't even had the chance to bounce ideas like that off the senior team. Some of them might be horrified for all I know. But I think we've got to range around. I think we've got to really work at this because I think it's really important that we feel proud of what we do and that we are living to those original values of this university.
We're getting close to the end, but there's one, and I may not be able to get through all the remaining 3, but there's one here from Tom Youngman. You said you wanted employable graduates. How can we empower graduates to be and shape the economy, not just be subject to corporations?
Well, I think we need to encourage entrepreneurship in our students. The There are several ways of looking at that. Of course, for those who are interested, we need to make it easy for them. We need almost like an entrepreneur scholarship type idea, so that the very best students who have entrepreneurship in mind develop a desire to come here. To an extent, I believe that type of idea is already going on, and I certainly know from Leeds that we were competing with UCL and with Edinburgh, I believe, for some funding to do this in greater number, and I think, well, I'm rather hopeful that all three will end up with some cash to do that. But there's also the notion of, should we be thinking about this for every student? Should it be part of the sort of extended global citizenship type concept? And I do think that that type of thinking is going to be the sort of thing that can differentiate us from others, and we should think quite seriously about incorporating it.
Michael, we've almost come to the end. Do you want to just say a last few words? Any points that you haven't got across that you would like to make before we close?
Well, let me say the bit I've enjoyed most is your questions, and apologies that we couldn't send a microphone round, because I think in those questions you can draw out of me what I'm really about, what I'm really like, and where my emphasis is, and so on. But I sincerely hope that from this and from my early writings, the Provost view in its new style, that you're beginning to get a feel for what your new President and Provost is really like, and I hope that you are ready and willing to get involved in that process that I described, of helping us now set a strategy that will really get us going and get us highly successful for our future. So thank you.
I'd like to express, first of all, our thanks to those who've organised today. Frank Pentner, who is the coordinator here at the Bloomsbury Theatre, Mark Sudbury and Kath Dean and Zoe Witter, who've made all the arrangements. And I would like just to say, from a personal point of view, having sat on the council and been its chair now for the last 5 years, to hear Michael's fresh approach to issues, first of all, re-emphasising the values of UCL. Secondly, a fresh look at the international strategy. Thirdly, real attention to the student experience, and in particular, ensuring that we provide the best possible teaching. And also his emphasis on the importance, which we've wrestled with as a university, with mixed success, on the whole issue of diversity, and in particular promotion prospects for BME staff and for women in academic positions. To hear his focus on all those things as important to him personally, and with the track record that he has, is very encouraging. So on behalf of all of us, Michael, thank you very much indeed for today.